There's a fruit there called durian. It's this really nasty smelling thing. The only thing I could compare it to in terms of smells, it honestly just smells like garbage, like trash. So if you ever just, go out or like maybe a dumpster, if you're a more cleanly person and you've never built your trash up, in your house, is a dumpster smell. You have to try it 3 times before you like it. But for me, I liked it on the first try, so I don't know what that says about me. It's a really interesting taste. It's really hard to describe, but it comes in like this really spiky, like shell, and it comes from the trees. And they actually sometimes can, if they fall from high up enough, they can actually kill you if you, get hit by it, because they weigh a lot. And so you always know, because they have a season, the fruit, it has a season. You always know it's durian season because you'll start smelling just trash, basically. You'll smell it. And then the more you eat it, you start smelling like that. So you could always tell if a missionary really liked durian because he'd smell like that. Like, oh, like you'd almost have to fight back from saying like, elder, like I can tell you like durian, especially if you don't. Like, like that, you don't smell too good. Oh. So there was one drink that I didn't like. This is probably the only thing I didn't like in terms of food or drink. It was like this coconut juice. He literally just took a coconut and he chopped it up a bit and he put it in a glass of water. So he literally just filled this glass, it's like this regular sized glass, and he put in chunks of coconut. And I'm just like, interesting. And so I had to eat that, drink that. And I remember thinking that was really gross. But it's a really popular one. Another one is where you have water with like corn in it. Like literally just like corn on the cob. They just like shave off the corn and they'll put it in. That's kind of, that was one I didn't like either. That was probably the 2 things I really didn't like. A lot of their drinks are, in my opinion, a lot more healthier. Rice, you eat rice every day. Get ready to eat rice. You eat curry pretty much every day. So if you've never had curry, you're going to expect to eat it. And it's different than the Indian curry, at least from what I've noticed, was that it was more like coconut based. And so it was more of a different version of that, so kind of sweeter. In my opinion, and it can definitely be spicy. Something I noticed is that if you told them you didn't want it spicy, they'd make it more spicy just because they love to see your reaction with that, especially for the American elders, or what they called them from America if they were white. For me, with my experience, they just thought I was one of them, even though a lot of the people. What else do we eat? Eating lots of fish. Fish is a pretty huge thing to eat every day also if you want. Another thing we eat also, commonly is chicken. Chicken was probably, I always ate chicken and rice, it seemed like, with any meal. I noticed they eat veggies a lot too. They'll eat veggies, like green veggies more. There's lots of fruit. You're going to try a lot of different fruits. In their culture, it's really rude not to eat it. The only time you could really get out of eating it is if you said you got sick from it. America has been termed by a lot of people as being really loud, really arrogant, or something like that, especially. And something I noticed is when I was speaking the language to the people is that they'd always say, like, you don't need to speak as loudly, you need to listen better. And that really at first threw me off. I'm like, well, no, I'll just speak louder to get my point across. But I realized what that meant is a lot of the people there would speak a lot more softly. If you do tend to be a more louder person, to learn to dial it back, because they view that as rude when you speak loud. If you just speak more louder, it's usually rude. I noticed a lot of the time that family is important in America for sure, but over there in Malaysia, I noticed a lot of the people really value family. Like I would say it was probably honestly like the number 1 thing they value besides just living comfortably. And so that was something I really noticed, is that family is everything. When I had my accident, they didn't really understand what a concussion was. And so they were giving me all these home remedies. And I remember one said, just if you drink this milk, it's like you'll get better, like you'll be healed. And I was thinking I don't think that'll do it, but I was being polite, like, okay, thank you. And because I knew they meant well. They were very suspicious. I remember seeing a witch doctor or a shaman, if you're thinking if you've I've seen that. And so they do believe in that, and spirits and possession. A lot of them do believe in that, and they're scared of that. I admired the fact that life was simpler in that fact, like I mentioned earlier. A lot of them want to put in their time at work and then go home and be with family. Or a lot of them weren't really obsessed with getting ahead and making a quick buck or something like in America. Kuching was close to the ocean, so out to the sea, and so a lot of its business was fishing and seafood, and so a lot of imports. So a lot of the workers would do that. And also another thing, a typical job for the people we taught, for the tribal people, or they had so many things, but to to help you understand, I'll just refer to them as Malaysians for that. But they would do a lot of construction work, what we would call construction, so they'd build a lot. And it was interesting because a lot of the Chinese people would have like the manager positions in those jobs. And so they would be like the bosses or the overheads, you know, the seers. And so, or they'd have more of the, we would call white collar jobs, you know, like being accountants or having technology, you know, fixing things like that. It almost created a resentment or animosity between the people I taught and the Chinese people just because of that, because it was almost like they almost viewed it as favoritism, like the government favored them, or that they had that they were actually educated, and a lot of the Chinese could read and write and had more than just a second grade or first grade or fifth grade education equivalent. The main transport for a lot of people were basically mopeds. So they were mopeds, little small little bikes, you know. And it was really funny because everywhere, like, I don't think I ever saw just one person riding on the bike, you know, like how we'd see in America, just one or two people at most. They'd always cram like 5 to 6 people on it. And if there was kids, it'd always be more. Another main transportation was buses and cars. And the traffic there, they really don't obey what we would call or have it in America, like the lights and everything. It was kind of like, they did have lights for sure, but a lot of the times they would just go with the flow of traffic. You'd have to go. If they were going, you'd want to go. And people would always cut in and out. I think I saw accidents every day without a doubt from mopeds, mostly mopeds. They use roundabouts, and the roundabouts for them, whereas if you've ever seen a roundabout in America, they're pretty small, but over there, they're just like these really huge things. Some of the places, they didn't have actual paved roads. Like most of the time, you're going to be on like dirt or semi-paved roads. And so like in process, some areas definitely had more paved roads. They did have a lot of buildings that would go up and more like apartment complex, so something you'd see in like a big city, any kind of city like Phoenix or Los Angeles or New York. They did have buildings like that, but the buildings weren't well kept. They were usually pretty like damaged or what we would think of more run down or ghetto. That would be terms like that came to my mind. Because of it rains every day in Kuching and in most Malaysia, it'll rain every day, is that it's really green. So it's almost like a jungle in that sense. Like if you've ever seen a video of a jungle or a picture, it was very green and lush throughout the city. It wasn't just all buildings and concrete or, you know, metal and everything. They had a lot of knockoffs of places, so knockoff brands. So like an iPhone, they'd have the knockoff version and they make it look really close. And also just with like watches, they'd have like fancy watches you see, but they were the knockoff version. So the weather, it rained pretty much every day. The two terms I always describe to people is that it was either really rainy or slightly less rainy. And so I don't think there was ever a day that I can remember, I was looking back at my journals, that it didn't rain. They would shower usually 2 to 3 times a day. So that was really different for me to get used to, because in America you generally shower once unless you do a sport or an activity. With owning guns, there wasn't really, like, it was banned as far as I remember to have guns. And so, I mean, obviously that doesn't stop some people from having them, but for the most part, I wasn't too worried. The typical assault would be with like a machete or like a rod, like a pipe or lead pipe. That would be kind of the thing. We did hear stories of that every now and then, but it wasn't like a common occurrence. So for me, I felt pretty safe